World War I comes, it's going to sweep away the entire world that was. And so let's take a look at what would happen as well as the origins of that conflict. Now, World War I, also known as the Great War, the war to end all wars, takes place in 4 years from 1914 to 1918. In those 4 years, 70 million plus soldiers are going to take up arms. 9 to 10 million are going to be killed, 25 million wounded, and many of those wounded are going to have permanent disfigurement or mental issues as a result of the war. We're going to call that shell shock. And so this is also the first total war in which civilians are going to be targeted directly, and so 6 to 7 million civilians are going to be killed in this war as well. It also introduces the idea of industrial warfare and the mobilization of an entire society for a conflict. And I would argue that more than any other conflict, the First World War shapes the entire 20th century and everything that was to come. Many of the modern-day issues in the Middle East can be linked back to the way that World War I ended after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. The century's first genocide was not carried out by the Nazis in the Holocaust, but by the Ottoman Empire, who carried out a genocide against the Armenians. This would have a large impact on the future to come. Likewise, World War I leads to the rise of the Soviet Union. Joseph Stalin and Vladimir Lenin and Leon Trotsky are all going to shape the century significantly. This war also leads to the rise of Adolf Hitler. An artist before the war, after World War I, he takes on a political career to avenge the loss of Germany in the First World War. And finally, the First World War sees the United States rise to international prominence as a world military power. And so when we talk about World War I, this is going to be a European war, fought between the major European powers. However, it's going to become a world war when the colonies of those European countries are going to be dragged into the conflict. And so this war is going to take place across the world, with the colonies being brought in, and eventually countries like Japan, China, and the United States would all be dragged into this international conflict. So there's a lot of different theories about why World War I starts, and no one theory really explains everything. But if we want to look at what's going to lead to this big cataclysm, it's really the immense changes that are going to happen in the world before the outbreak of war in 1914. Many of these we talked about in the United States: industrialization, urbanization, imperialism, and in Europe the same things are happening, and they're causing an immense amount of political upheaval. And the world as it was in 1914, the countries were largely led by old aristocracies and monarchs, who basically saw a lot of these political changes as happening, challenging their world order. Likewise, kind of the old borders between the European countries, the balance of power is going to be upset. And at the start of the war, most of the major countries of the world are going to be led by monarchs. By the end, only King George V would remain in power. The person in the picture is going to be the Emperor of Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II. The Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria-Hungary, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, Mehmed V, Britain's King, George V, Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. And all of these leaders were actually related to each other. Many of them were cousins, many of them shared the same grandmother, Queen Victoria. And so when we talk about World War I, a lot of what it's going to accomplish is to sweep away the old order of monarchs and aristocracies and usher in truly the modern era as we know it. So let's talk about the root of some of these conflicts that are going to lead to war. And arguably the most important of them is the creation of the German Empire in the late 1800s. Originally, Germany had just been a collection of states and kingdoms that were not united and therefore could not be considered to be a major world power. But then Prussia under Kaiser Wilhelm I, as well as the Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, who was a political and military leader, decided to unify the German kingdoms into one German empire. And in doing so, they fought several wars of conquest, as well as a very important war against France, the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. And in this Franco-Prussian War, Otto von Bismarck and Kaiser Wilhelm's armies defeated France to seize the territory of the Alsace-Lorraine. Now, France had traditionally held this territory, And so what this Franco-Prussian War begins is a century-long rivalry between France and Germany, and it explains why, when war comes, France and Germany are already enemies. So in 1871, the Wars of Unification are completed, and Kaiser Wilhelm I and Otto von Bismarck declare the creation of a German empire. Now, at the time of German unification, this is a new European power, and perhaps the most rapidly rising one, and this causes a lot of tension and a lot of fear in the other European powers. And so if we look at the modern-day German Empire, it's much larger than what is today Germany. And so it's a large country with a lot of controls in the Baltic and North Seas, and it's going to very, very rapidly become the continental power of Europe by the year 1900. And so the rise of Germany is very similar to the rise of the United States, where you see a very rapid industrialization and growth, the development of modern urban cities. Berlin, by the year 1900, is a wonder of the world, with public transportation, high science, technology, art. And with that industrial power is also going to come the desire for military power. Because as we began to see during the American Civil War, a country's military strength is now going to be reliant upon their ability to mass produce the machines necessary for war. And so by 1900, Germany, as a powerful country, is starting to challenge the international political order. Britain, France, Russia, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire had all had a balance of power. They had all controlled colonies and divided up the world, but now Germany is coming to the table as an economic and military superpower with really no kind of ability to expand. And so what this does is it creates a rivalry with Britain, creates fear in France and Russia, who are going to be potential enemies, and ultimately Germany's desire to become a colonial empire, to become the preeminent power in Europe, is going to cause tensions between Germany and those countries that do not want to see themselves lose power and influence in international politics. And so while Germany is late to the race on colonization and late to the race of kind of the wars of continental conquest, they are going to be the initiators of an arms race. The industrialized warfare that we're going to begin to see kicks off this race to develop the most and the newest technologically advanced weapons. And so Germany, under Kaiser Wilhelm II, who had dreamed, after visiting his British cousins, of a vast navy, began to build a modern industrial navy. This caused tensions with Great Britain, who saw Germany as a challenge to their supremacy of the sea. And so Germany's rapid buildup of their military kicks off a major military buildup across all of Europe as countries scramble not to fall behind in the arms race. Now, some of these new technologies include modern ships equipped with artillery batteries capable of fighting large sea battles as well as bombarding land. You see the development of modern artillery. Cannons were slow. Cannons were often inaccurate. Now there is almost no limit to the amount of shells that you can fire in a short period of time using modern artillery. And that's really what industrial warfare unleashes. There are just simply no more limits to warfare. You can produce as many pieces of artillery and weapons as possible, and there really is no limit on how many you can produce. All this is going to result in an incredible amount of destruction over those 4 years. There's no limit to the amount of shells that can be built and fired even in just a single day in this conflict. Citizens are going to go to work in these factories and produce millions of shells to be used in a potential future war. The development of the modern machine gun renders cavalry charges as well as kind of full frontal infantry assaults suicide attacks, and is going to contribute to the high loss of life in this conflict. Also, modern day hand grenades place artillery and destructive power in the hands of soldiers. And so all of these new technologies are going to create a perfect storm of destruction that's going to help us explain why this war is going to be so costly. But when we talk about how a minor conflict is going to erupt in world war, we have to talk about the alliance system. Now, all these fears about Germany's rise, as well as the potential shakeup of the world order, led the major powers of the world to dive into two competing alliances. France, Great Britain, and Russia formed the Triple Entente, in which they pledged mutually that if one country was attacked, that all would become involved. Likewise, Germany allied with Austria-Hungary in order to form an alliance that they thought could stand up to any international conflict. Italy was originally part of the Triple Alliance. They'll eventually leave and join the the Triple Entente, but Turkey, if you see down in the right, the Ottoman Empire is eventually going to jump in on the side of Germany and Austria-Hungary. But what all this created is a situation where a minor conflict involving one of these countries could potentially drag all of them into a major war. And in the Middle East, the power is going to be the Ottoman Empire. Now, the Ottoman Empire was known as the sick man of Europe. It's a dying empire. They had lost a lot of influence. But as you can see, their territory includes a lot of what is today the modern-day Middle East. Eventually, the Ottoman Empire is going to get involved in this conflict. They're going to ally with Germany and with Austria-Hungary, but by the end of the war, the Ottoman Empire is going to cease to exist. So if we talk about what led to the spark that caused this war, really the root of this is in nationalism. Now, nationalism in Europe is this idea that people have a great sense of pride in their country, but it's also this idea that peoples, ethnic peoples, religious groups inside of empires desired self-determination. Now, self-determination is this idea that a nationality or a people should have the ability to declare their own country, have their own government, and rule themselves. And so independence movements across these big empires began to crop up, which caused a number of problems, especially in a region known as the Balkans. And we'll take a look at the map in just a second. So there are different ethnic groups, Serbs, Croats, Bosnians, Slovenes, within this region of the Balkans, and one of them, the Serbians, had gained their independence from the Ottoman Empire. However, what this led to was a conflict between Austria-Hungary, which controlled Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Bosnians who wanted their independence from the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. And so the stage is set for the start of the war. So the region in blue is the Balkans. Essentially, it's in southern Europe, bordering Turkey, and the people who live there are known as Slavs. The Slavic peoples are an ethnic group, most closely tied kind of with the Russians in terms of a large country. And in the Balkans, you can see Serbia had gained its independence, but Bosnia and Croatia were still under the control of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. So what this led to was the formation of an independence movement in Bosnia that decided to take on terrorist tactics to achieve their goal. But beyond the spark that's going to cause the war, there's this idea that, like, why do all these major countries go to war over a single assassination? And the answer is that many of these European countries were actually looking for a war. There's this sense of nationalism in Europe where there's a desire to achieve honor and glory for one's country. There's also this belief in each country that since their nation is the best, Great Britain, Germany, France, that they would be the ones to win the war, and they would expand the power, the prestige, the colonies, the territory, the wealth of their individual country. And if you look at the European intelligentsia, this is the educated group of artists, political writers, politicians, kind of the thinkers of the day, believe that Europe was decadent. They'd gotten stale, that the old world order didn't suit all of the changes that had been happening. And so they believed that a war would be good, that it would shake things up and allow these necessary changes to happen in the political order to keep pace with how much economic and cultural life had changed during kind of industrialization leading up to 1914. And so the stage is set where we're going to have a conflict and a series of countries who are eager for war. And for his part, Otto von Bismarck, who had been one of the major leaders of Germany before the war, said that some damn foolish thing in the Balkans might set off a world war. Well, Otto von Bismarck was right. And so on June 28th, 1914, in Sarajevo, Bosnia, the Crown Prince of Austria-Hungary, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, toured the city with his wife. Waiting for him in the crowd were members of the Black Hand, a Serbian-backed Bosnian secret society whose goal was to get independence for Bosnia and Herzegovina. We consider this a terrorist organization, and they plot the assassination of the Archduke because they believe that the assassination would set off a war that would bring down the Austrian-Hungarian Empire and allow the Bosnians to gain their independence. And the interesting thing is they're not that far off in achieving their goal. And so in the crowd is a young man by the name of Gavril Princip. And Gavril Princip is going to be the person who's going to assassinate the Archduke and kick off the war. Rejected by the Serbian army, Gavril Princip is going to be the person who assassinates the Archduke and his wife when their car takes a wrong turn that puts it in his path, and eventually, after being arrested and hung, Gavril Princip will be no more. But the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand kicks off a major crisis, and stability in the Balkans region is going to require the Austrian-Hungarians, who control the territory, and the Russians, who have ethnic ties to the Bosnians and the Serbians, to cooperate. But that's not going to happen. And so Austria-Hungary issues an ultimatum. And an ultimatum is a or-else statement, as in you will do this or else to Serbia. And the conditions of this involved allowing Austria-Hungary to do an investigation, to take control of local government, essentially terms that Serbia would never agree to. And that was the point. So Austria-Hungary, after issuing the ultimatum to Serbia, asked for Germany's support in their war against Serbia. Serbia, for their part, asked for Russia's support, saying that Russia's the defender of the Slavic peoples, and so they needed to step in. And so, on July 28th of 1914, after Serbia failed to meet the ultimatum, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. And so this one declaration of war kicks off the alliance system. Germany declares war on Serbia, Russia declared war on Germany and Austria-Hungary, so Germany and Austria-Hungary declared war on Russia. Then France declared war on Germany and Austria-Hungary because of Russia. And so now, all of a sudden, a single assassination, Austria-Hungary's threats against Serbia have created a world war. And so all the countries begin mobilizing for war. Armies are being raised, volunteers are being called up, factories are retooling to begin making war materials, and the entire continent of Europe prepares themselves for war. Belgian soldiers, fearing an invasion by Germany, hop aboard bicycles along with their rifles in order to defend their airplanes. The first modern air forces are scrambled and blessed in order for the country to successfully win this war against the other. Factories are retooled to make shells and bombs. And so Germany is going to kick off the war by invading France through Belgium. The invasion of Belgium is going to bring Great Britain into the war. After Great Britain entered, the Ottoman Empire joined with Germany and Austria-Hungary. And with all the major European powers going to war, all of their colonies as well, including Canada, India, and beyond, are now going to be involved in this conflict. Soon, Japan, China, and others would be involved in this conflict as well. And so, across Europe, people cheering the war sign up eager to go fight in the war to end all wars, including the young Adolf Hitler in Munich in 1914. And so, the war has begun, but nobody in Europe knows yet what this war is going to bring.